Okay, our last section in chapter 5.6 is applications. So as I said, your last section was a very important section. I hope everyone worked hard on 5.5 because all of our applications are going to involve solving rational equations, which is what you learned in the last section. So there's 6 problems, word problems on your test. One of them you learned in 5.5, the one where you solve for a formula. The other 5 problems come from this section. So as we go over the problems in this section, I'll kind of give you an idea of what you can plan on seeing similar problems on the test. So our first type, and there's 2 of these on the test, is solving proportions. This is usually the one that students like, oh yeah, I've done these before, I get these. So these are usually the easy ones on the test. So a ratio is a comparison of 2 numbers. And our common word for ratio is fraction. So I'm comparing A to B, and it can also be written A colon B or A divided by B. And it can also be written as A to B. So there's 4 different ways that we can write it. This is the most common in math, is to write it as a fraction. So a fraction is just a ratio. When I set 2 ratios equal, one fraction equals another, then we call it a proportion. And there's a couple different ways that we can solve proportions. We can do what we've been doing all semester, or not all semester, all chapter long. We can multiply both sides by the LCD, which in this case would be BD, solve it that way. Or we can cross multiply the way you learned way back when. So let me show you both ways, and then you can pick, or you can switch back and forth. So if we have A over B equals C over D, we can say, oh, well, I learned in this chapter that if I multiply both sides by the LCD, which is B and D, write everything you see, all the fractions will disappear, and then I can solve. And that is still true. So AD equals, here the D's cancel, and I get BC. So that's how I get rid of the fractions using the methods we learned in chapter 5. Using methods that you learned from previous classes, you could just set your cross products equal. And like I said, it doesn't really matter to me which you do. So when we set our cross products equal, we say AD equals BC. And look at that, same thing. So 2 different ways to solve the same problem. So multiply both sides by the LCD, and that gets rid of fractions, or set your cross products equal, AD equals BC, and that gets rid of fractions. So it doesn't matter which way you do, whatever you're most comfortable with. So again, each fraction is called a ratio. When you set 2 ratios equal, we call that a proportion. And to solve proportions, you can use the LCD, like we have been in this chapter, or you can set your cross products equal. So I'll switch back and forth just so we can practice both ways. So this one's using LCD, so that sounds good to me. So the LCD is 6x, so we put a 6x beside the numerator of the first fraction and a 6x beside the numerator of the second fraction. You can see on the first fraction the x's cancel. On the second fraction the 6's cancel. So I'm left with 6 times 5, 30, equals 10 times x, 10x. Divide both sides by 10, and we get x equals 3. So we could have also said, oh, well, I want to use my old methods. I liked what I learned in high school. So you could say, okay, here's my problem. I want to solve this by cross multiplying, setting my 2 cross products equal. So I get 10x equals 30. Boom, x is 3, just like on the last problem. So they both take about the same amount of work, but I just want you to know that you get the same answer. It doesn't matter, because I always have students go, well, I don't know which method to use. It doesn't matter. They're both good methods, and you can use whichever one. So this stays consistent with what we've learned in this chapter. This is probably what you learned in previous classes. So we'll switch back and forth. How about it? Okay, so let's do this first one using LCD. So if I was adding two fractions and I wanted a common denominator, what would the common denominator be between 20 and 10? I don't have to pick 200. 20 times 10, there's something a lot smaller. 20, right? 20 would be the least common denominator. So I could multiply this side by 20, this side by 20. And then at this point, I always remember this from classes. Students will go, well, what if I would have picked 200? Guess what? We get the same answer. The least common denominator is 20, but 200 is a common denominator. It's just not the least. So don't worry, oh, wow, I wonder if there's one smaller. It doesn't matter. As long as you do the same thing to both sides, we still get the same answer. And if you're not good at common denominators, then do the setting the cross products equal thing. Then you don't have to worry about common denominators. But I'm doing both just because I think common denominators are so huge in this chapter. I want to make sure you're comfortable with them. So 20 divided by 20, 1. 20 divided by 10 is 2. So I get 1x equals 14. Boom. And you can see in the springs, I sometimes teach an 08 class, and I tell the students, you can check your work. So look and see, what is the common scalar product here? I'm multiplying by 2. So since these two are equal, to get that one, I have to multiply by 2, which would give me 14. Is that what I got? Yep. So some you can just use common sense. We call this a scalar product in Math 08. And so I tell them, if it's easy like this where you can see what you multiply by, then check it by multiplying this one and make sure you got the correct answer, which we did. So it's kind of cool. There's so many different ways to do these. Set your cross products equal. Multiply by the LCD. If the numbers are nice, use a scalar product. Like here, I wouldn't be able to use a scalar. Probably can't figure out. I think it's 1.3. I can do it in my head, but most students probably wouldn't know that multiplying that by 1.3 gives you that. So multiplying that by 1.3 would give me my x. So you don't want to get in and be overthinking everything. You should just use whatever method comes easiest first. So to me, since I can't tell what 4 times what is, well, I can tell, but since I can't wink tell, then what I can do is just set my cross products equal. Sorry, pin dropping. So this cross product would be 4 times x, and this cross product would be 19 times 5.2. So this cross product, I always do the x cross product first, so I have my x on my left like I like it. So now I just have to plug that into the calculator. So we have 19 times 5.2, which would be 98.8. So we have 4 times x equals 98.8. Then divide both sides by 4. So divide by 4, and we get 24.7. And remember how I said I think this is times 1.3 to get the 5.2? Well, let's look at what 19 times 1.3 is. Ding, ding, ding. Same answer we just got. So that would be the scalar multiple is 1.3, but like I said, I don't think a lot of people would recognize that. So just a different way. And you could have also done LCD times 19x times 19x. So many ways to do the same problem. Okay, so do what's in your comfort zone. So 24.7 it is. So we set our cross products equal, multiply those, and then solve for x by dividing by 4. Okay, let's go ahead and go to page 2. Or not 2, how about 9? Okay, now we're going to do some applications of proportions. And students always ask me, how would you know that this is a proportion problem? Well, it's pretty easy to tell because you compare the same quantities twice. I'm comparing centimeters to kilometers, and then I'm comparing what is the length of the river on the map, centimeters to kilometers. So you compare the same quantities twice, centimeters to kilometers, centimeters to kilometers. So the first thing I do is I write down what it is I'm comparing. And the reason why is these are super simple, but the one mistake I do see students make is they're not consistent. With a ratio and proportions, you have to be consistent. If centimeters is on the top, kilometers must be on the bottom. And what a lot of students do is they just copy the problem in the order it gives you. Don't do that. You will not get it right if you do that. So centimeters over kilometers, centimeters over kilometers, not in the order of the problem. Because see how 38 kilometers is listed first, and you would put it up there if you were doing the order of the problem, and it should go down here. So figure out what you're comparing. I keep it in the same order as the first sentence, and then I fill in 1 centimeter, 6 kilometers. Then it says, what is the length on the map? That would be centimeters. When the river is 38 kilometers, so go to kilometers, and look at that. I just have a simple little ratio. Nice, huh? So centimeters, kilometers, centimeters, kilometers. So I'm going to set my two cross products equal. So my first cross product is 6x. My second cross product is 38. Okay, very common mistake on this section. Do not round unless the problem tells you. This problem does not say round, so don't round your answer. And you're going to see when we go to the calculator, it goes on forever. Well, when it goes on forever and it doesn't say round, that means turn it into a fraction. So don't round. Students come out of high school and they're like rounding maniacs. In college, we want exact answers unless we say otherwise. So divide by 6, and this is what the typical student does, and this is what I would do too. I mean, I know it doesn't go unevenly, and I go, oh, well, I'm just going to write 6.3. Don't do it. That is a rounded answer. So you hit your second and see that F to D button, fraction to decimal. Hit enter, boom, there's your exact answer that didn't require any rounding. So 6 1/3, and then the only thing I need to do is label it, and that's why we have these here too. So 2 reasons. 1, so you can be consistent when you set it up. 2, so you know what the label is. X is on the centimeter side, so we say 6 1/3 centimeters. Oops. So golden rule, unless you're asked to round, do not round. The only exception to that, math, there's always exceptions, is money. Money, it's assumed it has to be 2 decimal places. So you're not going to write $17.385. You're going to write $17.39. So in that case, it's assumed that you know to round. But money is the only time you can round without being told. Okay, we only have 15 seconds left, so we'll pick up from here on the next video.